Hello, and welcome to Inside the Mind. I am Aaron Omer, and on this week's episode, our guest has over 15 years of experience in the sport world as a coach, coach developer, and as a budding mental performance practitioner. Dan Ourian earned his master's degree in sport psychology from John F. Kennedy University, where he completed a research thesis on emotional regulation among high school basketball coaches and created a mental skills training curriculum for basketball players entitled HoopsMinded. Dan has since started a private practice of the same name, and over the past 4 years, he has worked as a workshop facilitator for Positive Coaching Alliance. He is also the head boys varsity basketball coach at College Preparatory School in Oakland, California. Like always, give us a like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any new content. With that being said, let's dive inside the mind of Dan Ourian. So to start off each episode, we like to give you the opportunity to give us your personal definition of what sport and performance psychology is and why you think it is important for athletes and performers.
Sure. So the way I see it is it's the way an athlete's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors can help them be at their best when their best is needed. And so that takes on a range of areas that you consider, and it might go into a clinical direction, which is something I don't work with, but for me, it's really along the lines of performance enhancement. So how you can cultivate mental skills to help an athlete perform their best. And what was the second part of your question?
It was, and why do you find it important for athletes and performers?
Yeah, well, that's, for me personally, I knew growing up it was a very mental game. I grew up playing basketball, and I would always feel like I could perform one way in practice, and then when the lights were on in a game, it would be very different. And I attributed that to mental challenges for sure. And I think I've learned throughout, so many players and coaches will tell you that the game is mental. And you ask them, how mental is it? And they'll say, oh, it's like 80% mental. And then, well, how much do you train the mind? Oh, I don't really train it. I just, we just talk about it a little bit. So from that regard, I think it's underutilized. Obviously, the field has been around for several decades, but still is growing. In my sport of basketball, I think it's been a little bit later to be adopted, but it's certainly picked up over the last few years.
Well, looking back to kind of your background educationally and career-wise, what initially got you in? Well, you touched on kind of the reason behind why you found your interest in psychology. So what allowed you to take that next step to now pursuing your education in psychology?
Yeah, so I really came at it from a coaching perspective. So I've been a basketball coach for the last 20 years and also in sport administration, and just felt that there was another way to get at the soul of the game, or the heart of it all. And so while sports psychology is a mental concern, and when we look at mental attributes, for me, it's really an attempt to look at, well, how do we go deeper than just the game? How can the game be about more than the game? And so for me, sports psychology was a route to going deeper into that realm. And for me also, initially, it was a chance to add a layer of quality to my coaching practice. So really, I thought, okay, let me add sports psychology as a piece to being a basketball coach. But, a funny thing happens along the way when you're doing something, and then you change courses. Really what happened to me is I found and developed a new passion for sports psychology and mental skills training. So it really started initially as a coaching pursuit, but it changed me, and it changed my course entirely.
So from an ethical standpoint, we see there's this common dilemma of multiple relationships, just having that dual relationship role, and knowing your expertise in the field of sport and psychology, and then you're also a current high school head coach at College Prep. How do you manage that ethical dilemma? How do you manage keeping those two separated?
I don't think you can keep them completely separated, because I think coaches are sort of low-level sports psychology practitioners at all times. And me having the knowledge I have, it's hard to sort of siphon off this information. This knowledge I've gained is here, and then when I'm coaching, it's over here. I don't think that works. And so really, it's how do I get my hands around all of it and say, how can this make me a better coach when I'm coaching, and how can this make me a better mental performance trainer when I'm in that work? And I don't think you can fully separate them out. What I believe you need to do is you need to, as a head coach, you want to bring someone in to work in that realm. So I've always brought someone in with my high school team to work in that realm, because while I can work with athletes in the mental realm, and certainly I have and incorporated those tenets, I can't be the one they talk to about the coach when I'm the coach, right? They need someone to be able to vent about playing time, or, the coach's communication style, or whatever it may be. I need to allow them that space to talk to someone else. So I don't think I could wear both hats simultaneously, but I do think what's key is creating a climate for my team that allows them to be at their best. And that to me speaks directly to self-determination and making sure that they have input in what we're doing, that they feel connected to one another, and that they're growing a little bit each day and feeling more and more competent. So that's sort of a bit about how I try to shape the climate when I'm coaching, and that's directly informed by my education in sports psychology.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting seeing that bridge or that connection between the two, how you mentioned lower level practitioner versus actual practitioner, and how it's just continues on a day-to-day basis. Those same messages are getting poured on, whether it's as a coach or whether it's a practitioner. And I find those very interesting, and how, like you mentioned, basketball, it's kind of behind the eight ball on this. So you taking that step to opening that door. And I also seen in your bio that you work with coaches also. Can you talk about how you work with other coaches outside to implement these ideas and theories with them?
Yeah, so one way is I work with Positive Coaching Alliance as a trainer, and they have a curriculum in place that really is born out of sports psychology, helping coaches recognize that if athletes are making mistakes, that's how they're learning, that's how they're improving. Oftentimes, if a coach sees a player making a mistake, he or she is going to yell at that player or come down on that player, whereas we want them to see mistakes as a learning opportunity. To focus on effort as critical, as opposed to not necessarily what happens in the scoreboard, but the process and the effort was that put forth. And then also learning. Is there learning happening, and how is that happening? So Positive Coaching Alliance has really been one way that I've helped coaches. But in my past life in sport administration, I was able to work with coaches in that realm as well. So what I've taken from that and from PCA is using all of that material to put together coach workshops and do coach development in the Bay Area. So that's something that's new that I'm developing here with my private practice. But I think it's, again, putting your arms around all of the material in terms of coach development and saying, what can you offer to coaches that's unique?
All right. So taking a step back, before you moved out to the Bay Area, you had a pit stop in New York, working for the New York Knicks organization. Can you tell us a little about kind of what you did there and kind of how that translated into your experience and business that you do now?
So not a pit stop, but really grew up in New York, and that was home base for years until I moved out here about 6 years ago now. And so for me, I was a basketball lifer, through and through, and grew up a huge Knicks fan. And so had the opportunity to work for their community relations department. And that involved hosting groups and working at camps and different events. And here I was, like the biggest Knicks fan ever as a kid, who now, suited up, and I'm standing on the court with a group, and I'm bringing them the half court pregame and sort of seeing through their whole experience. And so that for me was a bit of a learning opportunity, but more so really a fulfillment of some sort of childhood dream of being involved with the organization. So really an amazing amazing stop along the journey. While I was doing that, I was also running the sport programs department at the 92nd Street Y, which is a YMHA on the Upper East Side of New York City. And so I spent 3 years in that role and hiring coaches, training coaches, as I mentioned, and overseeing basketball leagues, volleyball, a whole selection of sport programs that we had there. And that's where sort of the bug in me came to say, what about sports psychology? You've always sort of had that itch. What about pursuing your master's degree? What's it going to take? When are you going to go and make that leap? And so that's when I decided to come west and do that.
I think you made a great decision being a West Coast kid. I think it's a great world over here.
It's good living in here. There's no question.
So your private practice, HoopsMinded, on Instagram. Everybody check it out. I'll tag it below. What was the inspiration behind creating that? What was that driving factor that you knew that you wanted your own business to get this word out?
Well, I mean, I think it was no question that I was going to continue doing my on-court skill training. So one of the pieces back in New York was doing one-on-one basketball training or small groups. And so that's basketball tactical skill development, which nowadays, I heard a funny joke, like you could throw a basketball in any direction and hit a skill training session. And it's very prominent. But for me, what I thought would be a separator was adding the mental piece. So how can I start to work with basketball players on the mental side? And as we discussed, it's a sport that's been a little bit slower to adopt the mental piece, but it's certainly come a long ways in that direction. And so I really wanted to use both and not only say, okay, well, I'm doing the basketball skill training and I'm doing mental skills training, but also how can I combine the two? So while I was in my master's program, I created a 12-week curriculum that's for groups, and it essentially merges the two. So it's skill training on court with mental skill training built in. And so each week has a theme. There's 6 themes. They're repeated twice. And it goes through various mental skills. So we're talking about focus, goal setting, imagery, confidence. And then as we go through it, we kind of progress. And there's one for a younger age group and then a little bit more advanced for an older group. And so, then there's handouts. And that's something that I've rolled out for groups, for teams, for high schools, and really been something I've tried to innovate in and say, we don't have to be in the back room. You're not talking to a shrink. I'm not a sports psychologist. I'm a coach, and I'm in shorts and sneakers, and we're on the court, and we're talking about mindfulness. And then we're going to take some deep breaths, and we're going to sit, and you're going to do some imagery while you're sitting in a chair with a basketball in your hand. So it's not removed from the court. It's intertwined with what we're doing on court. And I think that's the beauty of it. I think that's how we can bring it out to more people. I think that's how basketball moves a long way towards it. But I really wanted to say, like, how can we take mental skills and bring it to basketball in a more user-friendly sort of way? So that's sort of my thinking behind it.
So building onto that, what's next? What's coming next? What's the future looking like for HoopsMinded, for you personally? Is there any particular milestone or point you're trying to reach before your career is all said and done?
I'm really big on this idea of run your own race. And also a mentor of mine now, he says walk to win. And I'm not in a rush. I'm an early practitioner in sport and performance psychology. I shifted careers later, more mid-career. So I'm really trying to build it brick by brick. I have an amazing opportunity right now, as you know, to be affiliate faculty member with Holy Names University's Applied Sport and Performance Psychology program. And so that's a tremendous opportunity for me, a recent graduate of a master's program to be in, and now to be in this role, to be instructing and also helping build the program. That's an amazing opportunity. It's a growth opportunity for me. And in terms of my private practice, like I said, it's really brick by brick. It's client by client. It's marketing. It's slowly building to where it's a more sustainable business. But I always knew that I wanted to add this component to what I already had in place. I think it's really just trying to develop it further and go along piece by piece, not trying to rush to the next thing. I think a lot of times people are constantly looking at what's the next job, what's the next goal. Well, I think, it's so important to star in your role, or as I'd like to say, bloom where you're planted, and really do good work at every stop along the way. Then the opportunities, they come to you. And so I don't have this sort of like great big outcome goal. I'm really just trying to show up in a great way every day.
Yeah, I love the common theme that I'm seeing, especially from hosting these interviews and all the information I'm learning in classes, the idea of just doing good work. That seems to be like a huge part of what we do. Well, you technically, me one day, that what we do is just simply doing good work. And that alone will take this business and just this idea of sport and performance psychology to that next level.
That's right. And that's where you're going to impress employers. Current employers become future references, and the work you do becomes your portfolio, right? And what you do now, it ends up being what people say about you later. So I think really making sure you're attending to what you're doing on a daily basis and doing that really well. And certainly you want to be keeping an eye on things and networking and such, but definitely making sure you're attending to your daily business in a great way.
So aside from doing good work, we're going to wrap this up after this. Is there any advice that you would give to any future practitioners or any current students that are dabbling inside this field to see if this is exactly what they do want to do?
Well, I think being very clear about a couple of things. One, being very clear about what it is you believe in. So we talk about philosophy of practice. You talk about your values. What do you want to do and what would you not do? Okay. So I think having clarity around that is really big. We talked about bloom where you're planted, really doing good work wherever you are. I think keeping a network warm, so having people you're regularly reaching out to, really important. Having mentors in this work is super important. And I think I've found people to be very gracious with their time, interested in helping others. And that's what our work is about. It's about service. And so I've found a few people that I regularly speak to that have helped me out, advised me, kept me open to, or kept me abreast of potential openings. But more so just as a guide, as someone you can bounce ideas off of. So I think having a mentor or several mentors that you speak to on a regular basis, and it may be in sport and performance psychology, it may be in something else, but I think mentorship is hugely important. And then I think, again, like clarifying what it is that you believe in and what it is you want to do. I think that's really, really important because that's going to be the basis for how you get the work across.
Well, that's perfect, Dan. I want to thank you for getting on Inside the Mind with me today. Really appreciate everything that you had to give for me and for all of the viewers who are here watching this. For the current students and future practitioners, we just want to take the time to say thank you.
My pleasure.
And we hope you have a good day and speak to you soon.
All right, Aaron. Appreciate it. Keep going, man.
Will do.
All right.